Good morning. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Can you hear me? Anybody? Maybe. Hello? Okay, Allison. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's see. Rebecca's there. Hold on. I'm letting more people in. There's another one coming. Okay. All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about applications of ecology and in particular population growth. So kind of stuff I skipped over fast before, but are important. And so let me share a screen and we'll go to one of the lectures and just kind of talk over a couple things about population ecology and logistic growth and exponential growth. So can you see my cursor? Anybody? Yes, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So this curve here, this shows kind of rapid population growth, kind of like exponential growth. But then when it gets to the top, whoops, let me go back, hold on. When it gets to the top here, then it slows because of environmental resistance, these limiting factors that increase with density. These can be predation, competition, limiting food, or increases in disease. And so populations can't grow forever. Eventually they become limited. In some cases, really harsh factors can limit the population, like a kind of a weather disaster or a flood or something like that. Those are density independent, but most times it's density that limits them. And so this logistic growth has kind of built into it exponential growth until you get to a certain density. And this has an important kind of hard a hard lesson about natural populations, that natural populations can grow fast in a certain range. For a certain range, they can grow really, really fast, and then their growth slows when it gets near carrying capacity. And so when we come across initial populations that have been not exploited, like say a new fishing ground or something like that, there'll be a population that's very large, close to its carrying capacity. And people have historically started fishing those. And it seems like when they fish them, the initial harvests, they may knock the population down 10% or 25%, but it puts it in a place where the population quickly grows back. And so it seems like you take fish and no fish, it doesn't affect their abundance. And so you can keep fishing more. And as long as you don't knock the population back too far, it zips right back. And so as long as you only take, fish from right here, the harvest is sustainable. And because the fish population will grow rapidly back towards carrying capacity. Okay, the maximum growth rate occurs kind of right at 1/2 of K. This is at 1/2 K. This is where the growth is maximum. Once you get above 1/2 the carry capacity, then these density dependent factors come in. And so initially you can harvest the population, you can take lots and lots of fish, and it doesn't seem to matter. But then when you get down below 1/2 K, the population is much smaller and the increase each year will be smaller. And so the population will have a harder and harder time bouncing back. And when you get back to these low areas here, populations are just sunk. They can't recover fast enough. And so let's see here, let me get to this one. So with fish populations, you want to only harvest them up to about 50% of the carrying capacity, because after that, it's not sustainable. The population will have a harder and harder time bouncing back. And so this has happened with wild populations over and over again, where they harvest, and suddenly the population just doesn't seem to recover. And so it kind of collapses. And so this has happened with some of the most abundant fish species. And it just keeps going on. So this has happened with cod, it's happening with tuna, it's happening with flounder, it's happening with sea bass. That the way that we exploit it kind of leads to the initial harvest seem like the population's unlimited, but as larger harvests reduce the population, the declines, the fish have a harder and harder time bouncing back from the declines. And so species that are sometimes very abundant can become threatened and endangered and have a hard time recovering. Then another kind of, I have to back up here again. Another kind of thing that happens is as long as there's new habitat available, organisms can grow really fast. And so populations can grow fast if the habitat's not limiting. And particularly if they can escape disease and predation, that is often a big environmental resistance that they can escape. And so then they can have this rapid growth. So that, I have to go down here to the invasive species ones. Where was that? That in areas where there's new populations, that where like you take a snowshoe hare or a European rabbit and introduce it into a place like Australia, the rabbits get away from their natural predators, which are often something like a lynx or hawks, and they wind up in a place where they're very generalist herbivores. They can eat almost anything. And so they will increase in abundance spectacularly. And this is the problem with invasive species. They're escaping their predators and they escape their disease organisms, and they can become spectacularly abundant. Many plants can do this, like kudzu, which is a vine. Bush honeysuckle is a shade-tolerant shrub that can grow underneath almost any tree. And so it's become very abundant in woods in eastern North America. Kudzu is a vine that's been very good at exploiting open habitats in the south of North America. And these things have escaped their predators. They've escaped herbivores that like to eat them, and they just reproduce until they're spectacularly abundant. Disease organisms are likely to do this as well. Disease organisms that wind up establishing themselves in a new population are really spectacularly efficient at killing their hosts. In the United States and in Freeport and the surrounding areas right now, we're in the midst of an ash tree die-off because of an insect called the emerald ash borer. And it's for this insect, each ash tree is a new piece of habitat. And so they get to these new habitats and there's no predator or disease that attacks these insects. And so their abundance is really spectacularly increased, and they've killed virtually every ash tree, which was one of the most popular shade trees in cities in Illinois. And so it's a spectacular dieback. Likewise, when a disease establishes itself from animals in human populations, these diseases spread. And so what we're seeing right now with the coronavirus is an animal disease spreading in human populations. And so, it's going to be a long, difficult thing to get this disease under control. And so these are applications of population biology, population ecology that are really important. Scientists are well aware of these, and it's these models are kind of important because they explain why some organisms are able to increase so fast, and why sometimes it seems like we harvest organisms for a long time, but then their populations crash. And it's just we get past the place where that population can easily recover. Okay, does anybody, so those are really important applications. Invasive species, diseases, how they spread in new populations, and then threatened and endangered species and sustainable harvest. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. There's one more really important application that I'd like to talk about, and so that's with the human stuff. And so let me see if I can find that. Okay. So, so human population growth. In human population growth, we see exponential growth, and this is kind of unusual because we're kind of a species that has an equilibrium life history. We reproduce slowly. We have one offspring. It takes a long time for people to get ready to reproduce. They often don't do it to 15 or 20 or 30 years after they're born. And then they only have one at a time. So this seems like it's kind of unusual, but the main response there is, for humans, we've managed to alter our environment such that we've increased the amount of food that we can produce, that the environment can produce. So we've kind of made our environment unlimited, and then we've reduced the causes of death by taking care of healthcare and limiting the spread of disease. And so that's really increased our population density and given us this picture of exponential growth. Okay, but that's got its own problem, and the problem is it's produced this giant wave of population. Okay, and when we see this giant wave of population that's increasing, that's that looks like we're not an equilibrium species. It looks like we're opportunistic. But as the environment changes, we don't see exponential population growth forever in one place. It seems like in one place what happens is, as things change, we see exponential population growth for a while, and as the areas become more dense, gradually there are behavioral and social changes that mean populations stabilize at a higher level. So populations in Europe, Japan, even in parts of North America have stabilized in many areas because people have adjusted their fertility rates as mortality rates have decreased in that area. So if you look at it, we get this demographic transition where first death rates fall, birth rates remain high, but as people get accustomed to low death rates, they actually drop the birth rates. And so you see that change, okay? And so sometimes you'll hear people talk about, what are we gonna do about population? And population doesn't increase forever. When you look at many countries, they have stable or declining populations because birth rates have fallen, okay, as much or more than death rates. It's only in some countries that you have these kind of typical population age structures of rapidly expanding populations, and those probably won't last forever. So that there's population growth is not the only problem. When we talk about humans' impact on the environment, okay, it's not just population that has an impact, it's also resource use. And so we use resources for energy, fossil fuels. We use nuclear power for energy. We use renewable energy sources. We use land for housing and settlements. We use forest products to provide building materials for paper and disposable products. We use an incredible amount of land for croplands for food and fiber production. and then we use wild resources in the sea to harvest that. Okay, and so the type of and amount of resource use we have depends not just on population, but on those resource patterns. And so our overall impact depends on patterns. And so if everybody's going to live in, a 5,000 square foot house and have 2 or 3 cars that get 5 miles to the gallon, and then, fly to, halfway around the world for vacations 3 times a year, we'll have a pretty high impact. But if people live in areas close to where they work, if they use mass transit or drive a really fuel efficient car, and just 1 car per person, and they they vacation close to home, they can have a much lighter impact on the environment. And so we'll talk about environmental impact and about how to do that a little bit next week, as well as review. Okay. All right, so there's big applications of ecology ideas and of population biology ideas. That's kind of what I wanted to go over. Does anybody have any questions? You can chat them, or you could just ask. Rebecca, do you have any questions? Allison, Hannah? Okay. All right. So once again, I'll send an email out. We'll have 2 meetings next week. I think probably Tuesday again and Friday. I am planning to have some review materials available for Tuesday. And so I'll introduce those on Tuesday. And so those will include a list of topics or kind of objectives. And I'll have essay questions. You'll have to write an essay on the final. And then I'll have a PowerPoint that should be available early in the week, I hope. Actually, I'll have 2. One will be on our review, and one will be on kind of climate change and impacts that are associated with climate change. And so that's what I'm hoping to do. There's not going to be any lab exam. The final exam, I have to look at the schedule. Again, available May 11th. Will close on the 13th. Mostly multiple choice questions, most that you've seen before. Something like 3 to 5 questions per chapter. Anything else?
Will our final then be set up like our last test? Like, should we expect questions from the quizzes?
Yes, you should.
Okay.
So it'll be it'll be available on Moodle.
Mm-hmm.
Take that at home. You'll have it'll be 2 hours, but it won't be twice as long as a regular exam. There'll only be 1 essay. There'll probably be somewhere between 50 and 75 total questions. I was going to ask if you had any preference. I stick the essay at the end, but if you'd like, I could put the essay right in the front. Does anybody have it?
I think it's fine, because when we did our last test, I just skipped to the essay and did that first. You can click on it.
Okay. Anybody else? So that doesn't matter.
Yeah, it didn't bother me.
Okay. So just know it'll be there, and I'll put it at the end again. Okay. All right. Okay, so it'll be 2 times next week, and then that will be the end of meetings. There'll be 2 PowerPoints. I'm working on grading. I'm way behind on grading. I apologize. And well, we'll just see how it goes. All right. Anybody else? Hannah, anything?
No.
No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I hope things go well. Study hard. I hope the other classes are going well. And I should get a lot of the grading done this week. So a lot of those things will show up this week. Okay. All right. I'm going to end the meeting. Again, Tuesday and Friday next week, I'll be available. And then we'll have 2 PowerPoints and some review materials. Okay. All right. Let's gonna end the meeting. Here we go.